So we are here at the Richmond Tattoo Festival in 2019 with Gunnar. Gunnar, thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk with us.
Oh, thank you.
Gunnar, can you tell everybody where you work and what city and shop you work at?
I'm currently at Greystone Tattoo in Gahanna, Ohio, and I just moved back out there about 3 months ago or something.
How close is Gahanna, Ohio to Columbus?
Gahanna is right outside. It's the suburb. It's like a suburb right outside Columbus. So Columbus is like within the Beltway, and Gahanna's right outside the Beltway.
Who do you work with there?
Currently, I work with a young lady named Natalie. I wish I had everybody's Instagram, but it's Natalie, Nicole, Richard Cook, and Mika, who's the first-year tattoo artist.
So you've
been... and Andala, who's another female artist. It's a primarily female shop, which is pretty neat.
I thought it was just you and Rich.
Nope. So
it's good to see that there's multiple people there.
Yeah, it's 6 people total. 4 young ladies, and then Richard and I.
Nice.
So, yeah.
So you've been around the tattoo industry for a very long time.
25 years or so.
Can you give me a quick recap of your tattoo career?
I started in Connecticut, served 2 apprenticeships, sort of, before starting my professional career. I always say it was around 1997, because I kind of consider like the stumbling part of the first year of tattooing, the learning process still. And then after a few years, I moved out to Columbus, where I ended up working at Stain Skin with Derb Morrison, who does like Hell City and True Tubes and whatnot. And then opened up my own shop called Gods and Monsters with Hoffa and a guy named Tom Cinnamon. And then did the Newfound Glory art stuff, and then moved out to California, and then worked out in California at a couple different shops, Tattoo Revolution out in Redlands at the time, and Guru Tattoo in San Diego, and then another shop called Red Door, and then moved back to Ohio for a bit, and then I opened up my second studio out in Lancaster, Ohio, which was more like a gallery and art studio, where I was like tattooing, painting, and then teaching art classes. And then sold everything I owned, moved into a Jeep, drove around the country for a few months, ended up in California for a couple months, then moved out to Boston, and then from Boston to Ohio. So I've kind of been all over the place the last 25 years.
So why do you keep going between Ohio, Southern California, and Boston?
So I grew up in Connecticut. That's where my family all lives. I ended up in Boston because I had a friend who was kind of getting a project going out there and asked me if I would agree to come help him for a little bit. So I went out there to help him. And of course he was helping me because I was kind of refooting after my travels across the country. And then my kids live in Ohio. And then I just fell in love with Southern California when I was younger, when I was really into the pop punk scene and whatnot. And so I went out there to be closer. I got offered, after doing the art for that Newfound Glory thing, I had gotten offered a toy contract with a company out there that didn't end up panning out, but I had went out there to kind of pursue that. And then I moved back to Ohio to be closer to my kids again, because it sucked being away from them. And then after they grew up, I thought I'd go back out to California and live back out there, but I had changed too much, and it wasn't like as fun as I remembered it being. I was too old. I was like older and more into not being where everything is so busy and so fast paced. So
you went from living in Lancaster to LA, which I'm sure was
Yeah, and for those that don't know, like Lancaster, Ohio, outside of its well-known, it's known for General Sherman, who's like a famous Civil War general, was born there, and a bunch of, It's a kind of a rural town in Ohio, so it's not a big population, and it's kind of out in the country. And then I spent that, like, the few months, like 3 months, living out of my Jeep and doing that cross country journey, which where I spent, at that point I'd spent 3 months by myself, like practically alone every day, and in nature and in the woods. So when I got to California, like, I was hypersensitive to sound and people. Like, everything seemed weird and fake to me. It was a really strange, like, surreal experience. Like, I would show up to work and be like almost shell shocked from, like, the noise and the fast pace of everything. So it was almost the worst thing I could do, because I had gone from, like, this, like, peace and serenity to, like, things moving much faster, and everything kind of bothered me, like loud music, like lots of people, like crowds and stuff. Like, I was really hypersensitive to that. So I ended up leaving California, and then was heading back. I was going to try and find a job in Colorado, and so I was just driving, looking for work out in Colorado, and that was kind of hard to find places to live, and I had exhausted my funds at this point. Like, I wasn't really working a lot in California, so I was quickly, like, going through what little money I had, and then I had gotten an offer to move out to Boston to help, like, a shop that was expanding. They were shy some artists, so I went out there and took that position to kind of help them during that transition. And then it wasn't like a place I had set out to kind of live. It was kind of just a transitional period. And then as soon as I had a chance, I went back to Ohio to be back in Ohio.
So you traveled across America in 2016, as you were just talking about.
Yeah.
I don't want you to give away your favorite spots, but what were some of your favorite spots in America?
I really fell in love with the Rockies. Like, I did not want to leave the Rockies because of how diverse it was. So that was like basically I was trying to find, like, where I wanted to live next, because now I'm getting older, and I really am, like, trying to figure out where I want to settle down once my kids are, married and doing their lives, or whatever they're doing, whether it's not married, but, growing up when they're adults. So I was trying to find, like, where my next place in life would be, because I'm not from Ohio. I only had my kids there, so I don't have, like, a lot of, like, attachment to it outside of my children. And then so I fell in love with the Rockies a lot. I really enjoyed that, because I just like the diversity that I could be, like, in what looked like the desert one minute, and then up in the mountains the next minute, and in these green meadows, and you're still kind of close enough to population. But with the the legalization boom, like, it is like you might as well move to California. Yep. It's so crowded out in those areas now that it wasn't, and the cost of living is, like, crazy, and housing was, like, way more difficult than you would think, because everybody, like, turned stuff into Airbnbs. It seemed like there was no, like, rental properties. It was like everything was an Airbnb now. But I liked it a lot out there. Like, I really enjoyed that, and Utah was really enjoyable, because I went out to Moab and out to the desert area, and then I love Olympic National Forest up in Washington. I mean, you could have, like, seven different ecosystems up there. So you can be in the jungle. Like, it's the only natural rainforest in America is up there, in North America, yeah. So they have, like, on one side's like a rainforest, and then you can drive, like, to the other side of the mountain and have a whole different, like, experience, and it's like a 20-minute drive. And so I got to camp out on the beach up there. I got to camp up in the mountains, like, so I got to, like, do a lot of stuff. And the way I was kind of doing it, like, I didn't have, like, a lot of money, or so I was, and I just, if it didn't fit in my Jeep, it didn't come, so I didn't have much. I had, like, a hammock I had set up in my Jeep, and I would just sleep in the like, I would pull off the side of the road and I'd sleep in my hammock, and then I would, like, I got a national park pass, and I would kind of pull into the national, into a park, and I'd, find like a place I could pull off, like in the Jeep, and I'd sleep in the Jeep, and then I would, like get up, I'd hike in the morning, and then after I got done hiking, I was eating like a lot of like tuna packets, and I wasn't eating a lot, but I was like, I was getting by, and then I'd shower in the river, or like I would just like jump in in a river or get under a waterfall, and then I'd get back in my car and I'd drive to the next spot, hike a new spot, camp out for the night, wake up in the morning. So I was like constantly in the go. So I saw more of like America, I think, in 3 months than most people could see.
Sounds like it.
And I started my journey in Connecticut. So I actually had driven from Ohio to Connecticut, and then all the way back to the Rockies, then through Utah, up to Idaho, over to Washington, down through Oregon, down through Northern California. Then I went and worked in LA because I had like 3 months to kill because I had closed my business and my lease had come up on my business, and so that was a good time to get out. And then the job offer was available in August, so I'd had this gap of 3 months, and I'm like, what am I going to do for 3 months? And so then I was like, fuck it, I'll live in my car and see the country. And it was crazy because it actually cost me less to do that than a normal month's worth of bills, expenses was.
Yeah, because you weren't sleeping in hotels or anything.
Because I wasn't staying in hotels, and I just went and shopped at like grocery stores and bought cheap food and on-the-go food. And I really I tried to figure out how I could do it for the least amount, because the idea was I was trying to like learn to be a minimalist at the time. So I had sold or donated everything I owned, I dumped everything. And I wanted to become a minimalist because I had this idea. I was on like this spiritual search. And so I had this idea that like if I did it as a pilgrimage, the idea is ideally you do it with nothing. Like I should have been barefoot walking across the country essentially, but I still had a future and life I needed to create. So I did it with very little, and then I had minimal food, and then people would offer me help. So I was having like people would buy me, like I had the Ted Marks up in, sorry Ted if you didn't want people to know, but he got me a hotel room. Like he didn't even know me. He just had been following my journey on Instagram, and him and his wife were like nice enough to put me up in a room so I could get a bed for the night, because they were like, you've been on the road this long, you could. Yeah, it was super nice. And then I got they didn't know, they just were like, hey man, just check in, it's there waiting for you. And I rolled into town, and so thank you for that again. But they if they watch this, but there were people would just give me, like they would let me stay at their house or whatever, and we would have dinner, and it was like with strangers, like I would put a call out on Instagram, like I'll be here if you want to meet up and say hi, and then people, I'd meet with people and get a beer or something and meet strangers, and that was part of the journey experience I wanted. Like my idea of a pilgrimage is, you go with very little, and you have to humble yourself. So I had been like in a place where my career and ego had been out of control for so long. I was trying to like learn humility, and part of humility is like not having anything and having to ask for help along the way. And I was doing it willfully, so it's a little different than someone who has to go, like that loses everything and has to like really beg for help, like so it's not, like I feel like they're really, far more humbled than I ever could have been through the experience. But the idea was to like, if people offered you help, you accept it, because it's hard for people. Like many of us never ask for help. Like a lot of people will never ask for help. We're so like, our egos are so driven that we're afraid to be like, hey man, like I'm in a hard place right now, or I'm in a hard time. And I know personally I've done that where I thought I could get through moments, whether it's like emotionally or monetarily, and I won't even ask my family to like help me. Nobody knows anything's wrong, and I know people who do that stuff all the time. So this was a big learning experience for me to do that. So that was the whole point of the journey, like for that, was to do that. And then when I got to California, I figured I'd get back on my feet and reboot everything. But when I got out there, I just was so changed by my experience and where I had come from that it didn't fit. And I stuck it out for about 3 months and then kind of knew instantly I didn't want to be there. And I'd kind of known early on that I didn't want to be there, but I was hoping it was going to get better once I got through the shell shock of the my alter, like how different I'd become. And it's hard because I'd moved to like Calabasas area. So here I am, I'm a minimalist. At this point, I own like a knapsack of clothing. I don't own anything. And it's a place that is like all materialistic. So it's like, what kind of car do you drive? And, like, where do you live? And what shoes you wear all matter. And I'm all, like, dude, I got, like, even still, I own like 7 t-shirts and 2 pairs of pants, and that's my wardrobe. Like, I've like learned to like live with nothing because I don't know, it just feels like it doesn't bother me at all. Like for some people it like freaks them out, and I'm like, once you kind of get used to it, it's not like a big deal. My clothes are clean. I own a washer dryer. My clothes are clean. I just like that I'm not like it doesn't rule my life anymore. So now instead of taking that money to go buy like the fanciest whatever's next, I'm like, I'm just going to invest this and start to build my future there or whatever, like the money goes different. So I just learned how to learn, like I lived way different than most people I know now. And I don't know, it's interesting for me because sometimes I'm like, man, I don't know how to relate to you. Like, but I don't know. I think it was something I needed to go through. So
this was in 17, not 16.
It would have been 2000. Yeah, 2000. I mean, it's still kind of going because it started about May 2017 is when I think when I closed the shop.
Because I was out in Colorado, and I remember that you were passing through Colorado, and I tried to meet up with you, but we were just too far apart. I was in Denver for a couple of days. Oh. And you were just about 3 hours south, I think. But,
I might have gone down to like Durango or something at that point.
So when you moved out of LA back to Boston, did you do the same sort of journey?
I did a much shorter version. So I had some friends who were having, it was Thanksgiving time when I left. So I stayed till about November-ish, October, November. I started in Southern California, and then this time I didn't get to see the Grand Canyon. So this time I went through the Grand Canyon and camped out there and then came up. I had friends who were having Thanksgiving in Breckenridge, so I went and stayed with them for Thanksgiving, and then from there I kind of shot out to Connecticut, and then the studio was supposed to be ready to roll by January, and they ended up having some building issues where they were waiting on codes and permit stuff to get everything. I was supposed to start working in January, and I don't think I actually started working again till like February. So I had stayed with my family and stuff while I waited for things to get kind of put back in place. And then, then I was there in March, and then I just moved back out. I moved out here in May, back out to Ohio, I think in May.
So you've tattooed on the West Coast, East Coast, and Midwest. Do you notice any difference in the cultures between the tattoo culture between the 3 areas? I know a lot of people think the Midwest is a lot slower, is a lot more slower paced life than the East Coast and West Coast.
I think if you would have asked me this question like 15 years ago or 10 years ago maybe, there was a time, like when I started in Connecticut, and then I went to, like I went from Connecticut to Columbus. Like Columbus had a pretty good tattoo scene. I mean, it's a really there's a lot of great artists that have come through Connecticut historically. So Columbus had a very strong tattoo scene. And they had people were pretty good collectors in Columbus. I mean, if you went rural, it wasn't the same, but if you stayed in the city, it was pretty good. And it was always funny because people think Columbus was the country, so they didn't, when I went to California, they were like, oh man, would you just come from cow country? And I'm like, well, it's like a city, it's it's a college town, so it's pretty youthful there. And but over the years, Columbus has gotten vastly bigger. But then when I went to California was a real tattoo mecca comparatively to the East Coast or to, I mean, it was everybody out there was tattooed when I had gotten out there, 12, 15 years ago. Then when the TV and social media hit, it's everywhere's the same. When you travel now, outside of rural stuff, every place seems the same to me now. Like, it's so, like, everything's kind of gentrified to some degree, and it feels like everything is like even coming here, like being in Richmond, I'm like, they're like, what's Ohio like? And I'm like, Columbus is just like this. Like, it's just like Richmond.
Yep.
It's the same, like, microbreweries, and it's the same Chipotle, and it's the same, you know, Applebee's or whatever, like, chain restaurant. Like, we have all the same stuff. It's all the same thing. All the cult, like, all the kid, like, a hipster's a hipster no matter where you go. And it's weird, even like when I get online now and I look at like other countries. I was just commenting about this recently because I look at like the shop setups, like in whether it's like Europe or Russia or South America now. And as America, I always thought we were so different, you know, than all these other countries. But when I look at tattoo studios or tattooer, I can't tell where people are from now. The studio looks exactly the same as the studios I work in here. Like, it might as well just be right down the road, and it could be like in, you know, a whole different country now. And I'm like, man, everything kind of is starting to look the same to me. Like, I'm not traveling as much, like, globally as much as I do the United States. But every time I go, like, to me, it's like San Antonio or Austin, or, you know, like, it's not much different than Columbus or, you know, Cincinnati or Hartford, Connecticut, or Quincy, Massachusetts. You know, it's like they all kind of seem the same. They all kind of are like, the people change a little, the accents change a little, but all in all, it's almost like, unless you're getting out into the rural, most of the stuff's pretty similar now. So, and tattoo culture is so hip everywhere now. Like, Columbus is heavily tattooed now. Like, so I think you used to be able to, like, they used to stand out, but now I don't see that. Even, you know, like
social media,
I think, balanced everything. It kind of like, you know, it's like people used to look at the Midwest like it was ignorant, and, you know, like, oh, they're so much more backwards than the coastlines. And I'm like, they're not at all. Like, they're really, it's all this, you know, like, maybe rural areas tend to not get stuff as fast, but for the most part, people are the same. Like, even Lancaster, like, now, dude, that town has grown up just in the few years I've been gone, and it's like a big town now. Like, it's really interesting. So, and you're having population fluxes, like, so places are starting to boom, and I don't know. And I think we're going to see even more of that. I think everything's going to kind of become even more similar instead of less, you know, like, I don't know. I miss the fact that there's not, like, culturally, like, things aren't more different. Like, because I want to go somewhere that's, like, feels completely different than where I've been, you know. But
I follow you.
I think coast-wise, I think if you, like, look now, it's pretty similar.
Yeah.
But
so one of the things you mentioned was going to San Antonio, which was where the
Texas Tattoo Educational.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
You did that in Explore.
Yep.
Can you talk about the seminars that you did there?
So for
the whole seminar, just a general topic over it.
Yeah. So right now, what's kind of neat is, like, you know, having done this for so, like, I started giving my first seminars back around early 2000s. Was probably when I first did, like, a convention seminar, like, small room convention, and, you know, you had, like, maybe 8 people showed up back then or something, or maybe, you know, it could be, like, a little bit bigger. But, and then because I feel like there's some history should take place, because people should get a little bit of credit where credit's due. Paradise Tattoo Gathering. I mean, and I'm talking, like, I don't know who watches this, because now we're so internationally based. So can only speak for America, my experience in the United States, you know. Paradise Tattoo Gathering was, like, the first place I'd ever been to where I experienced a weekend of submersive educational seminars. But also this idea that, like, unlike a convention where conventions are people coming to tattoo and meet, like, you know, the clientele that comes in off the streets, it was a place where tattoo artists could go and talk art and tattooing and growth and make connections and network. And it's really neat. It's like a very communal feeling. Like, you feel like you're a part of something. Like, when I come to, like, a convention, I feel like I'm, you know, hanging out with people there, but it doesn't have the same, like, community vibe as an educational setting does, where you are kind of humbling yourself to go, I don't know everything, I want to learn more, and here's some peers around me and they're here to learn more. And so Paradise was a really neat experience. We had they held it in the mountains, and they had people, a lot of great artists showed up to hang out and talk art. So then I think the Explorer came about, and they did their stuff. And Explorer's pretty neat. It's Explorer's kind of like in Texas Tattoo Educational, and I need to talk about both because I'll be hosting the Texas Tattoo Educational next month down in San Antonio. Is a localized one. Explorer travels from different states to do it. And Explorer's doing a really cool one this year. It's going to be an all-woman conference in November. So if you guys are watching this, I highly recommend looking into this. All the educators for the Explorer are going to be female tattoo artists, which is pretty neat to see this movement, because I come from a time when, not that there was no female tattoo artists, but I feel like they weren't getting the same recognition. They weren't getting kind of the same playing field back then, and a lot of people who had to strive pretty hard to get that noticed. And they had a convention. I think I'm not going to be able to remember the artist's name. Did a Florida one. Dina Lippens, maybe? I'm not going to remember who did it, but there was a female. They used to have a female tattoo convention in all female hosted tattoo show down in Florida. But so this is kind of a neat thing to have this educational thing. And I got to see Carrie Barba speak at the one I taught at. And it was powerful, because I've been doing this 25 years, and it's a hard career to maintain and chug along in for that long. And she's been doing it twice as long as 40 years or whatever she said she had been doing it for, quite a long time, 30 something years, 40 years.
Especially being a shop owner too.
Being a shop and still being relevant.
Yep.
She still is putting out top caliber work. And she's not only probably the most beautiful person I've ever met, but her heart is just, it glows. But she is also, she cares about tattoo, she genuinely cares about all this stuff. And for her, to get the education, first you're hearing it directly from someone who lived a part of it, which is kind of neat. It's I can't talk about this 70s of tattooing or 80s of tattooing, and she's there talking about these periods of time, and that was really neat. And she runs the oldest tattoo studio, I think, in America is what the Outer Limits claim is. So that's kind of cool. But what was neat about both of them, the Texas Tattoo Educational was the first one I had gotten invited to, and I had done. I was doing all the writing at the time. I was doing these writings on Instagram about my journey in across country at the time, and then it became me talking about being a tattoo artist and advice I would kind of give. I was given to younger tattoo artists that were things I wish somebody would have told me 25 years ago. So I had gotten invited to go speak there, and it was really neat. I got to present alongside some awesome people. I'm trying to remember who was there at the time. I think Joshua Bowers and Ty Harris and not at the Texas one. Steve Compton.
Oh, okay.
Aaron Springs. Corey. God damn it! I'm drawing blanks right now. Ty Harris was there. I can't. Sorry guys, I can't remember everybody, but it was awesome. Everybody was super big niece, I think. And so it was super cool. Everybody was super nice, and you do an auditorium style presentation. So you're just presenting your 90 minutes worth of material, and then a Q&A. And so it's pretty cool. It's really neat. It's reining it in at times, and maybe that's a talk for another time, but nowadays people are willing to share. And so as a young artist, if you're not taking advantage of the fact that people are willing to give you all of their tricks, like you're crazy. Like to me, it's like madness to not take advantage. Like even, you know, like for someone like me, I've been doing it 25 years and I go and in order to stay relevant, you've got to continue educating yourself. You know, you've got to like, if you don't adapt, you know, are going to get eaten up and disappear. Like, and so you've got to like keep learning and keep growing. And so these seminars are pretty awesome for that. And the Explorer Tattoo Conference, I really enjoyed too, because we got to do, we did portfolio reviews there. And so they had set up a night where you could do portfolio reviews, and you sit down with, you know, anybody who wants to come up and ask to like have their portfolio honestly reviewed. And it was like supposed to be from like 9 till midnight or something on one of the nights. And I ended up, I think I was there from like 9 till like 6 in the morning or 5 in the morning. I didn't stop. Like if people wanted to talk, I was like, that's what I came for. Yeah. And so I sat with a lot of people and got to talk till all hours of the night about what I love, you know, tattooing, and try and help people. And I loved that part. And then I got to do Explore again. I got asked to come back and speak again. And we did it this year. And I got like one of the neatest experiences is I was doing a portfolio review, and Lindsay Bug Baker, you know, on Instagram, she was there sitting next to me, and I was like, you know, what would you do? And then she drew, you know, like did my drawing, and Timmy B was there, and then we're taking some kid's portfolio, and Russ Abbott actually reminded me of this, because he was like, dude, watching that moment was kind of neat, and I thought that was neat that he brought that up. But, you know, here we are, like 3 artists that, you know, all kind of admire each other and are able to not only help somebody, but we're like, how would you do that? How would you do that? Like, oh, that's how I would do it. And we're feeding off of each other. And I'm an older artist, so here I am, and I get to be next to these youthful artists that I'm like admiring. And then I can only imagine like the person who's like, I wouldn't know what it would be like to be like a few years into my career as a tattoo artist, and have people that are like, have built careers in tattooing, multiple ones, like willing to sit down and, you know, like help my art, but also helping each other a lot. Like that wasn't a thing that like nobody did that I can remember when I was like tattooing. I mean, to me, that would be like if I could, you know, if I was sitting there and like Guy Atchison and Philip Liu or whatever, and, you know, Paul Booth came down and sat down, and I mean, you know, maybe different caliber, but if those guys would have sat down with my portfolio in my first couple of years of tattooing, like I wouldn't even know what that feeling would be like. And so to me, like I didn't really think about it because I was being selfish about it. Like for me, it was like, man, what a cool thing that was for me. And then after, I was like, man, I wouldn't even know what that would be like to be a young artist and have that moment. And so the fact that these like conferences open up moments like that make them available, and it's scary getting your portfolio reviewed, period, but now you're doing it in front of a crowd, because a crowd is, you know, people gather around, they want to see what's happening, they want to be a part of it, and now you're willing to put yourself out to just get a little bit better, but now you're doing it in front of a crowd. Like, so that's like another thing, like the humility that goes along with that you have to be able to be like, I just want to get better, so I'm gonna be like, take this, because most people they don't want to be critiqued at all. Like the average person doesn't want somebody to be like, this is what you could do to be better, and now you're willing to do it in this environment. And I think it's because everybody's vulnerable in that environment, and you know, we're putting ourselves there to learn, and so you have to open yourself up to be vulnerable to grow as an artist. Because if you don't allow yourself to like let go of your ego for a minute, you're gonna stagnate, and you're gonna never get better. And now you're doing it with like a whole group of however many people are there, 400 people that are sitting in these rooms that are like, dude, we're all here to humble ourselves and to get better. And I think it's easier to drop your guard Whereas like I feel when people kind of come to conventions, everybody's like on guard. Like I need to strut my ego and not feel like less than I am, or or feel less than I feel inside. And it becomes more about the competition and am I being seen next to the right people, and am I entering the contest? Is my work being seen? Does everybody think I'm cool? Like all that shit is gone at these conferences. Nobody's trying to be cooler than the next person. Like that doesn't exist there. So I feel way more at home at the educational conferences than I do now at tattoo conventions. When I come to tattoo conventions, I feel like sometimes it's like a dog and pony show. Like it's like, hey, look at me, man. Like look at what I did, or like what thing I'm on, or get all my sponsors in the make sure my fucking banners are all seen. I'm waving all my flags, like, and it's like all like not the real part of what tattooing is, or art, I guess, to me. Like it's the like, it's not the part that where all the like growth and all the like challenge, overcoming the challenges of like your insecurities come from, and it's not the part that people post on the Instagram or talk about. But the reality is most artists out there are insecure beings trying to hope that someone likes what they're putting out, and then they strut around kind of faking that they're not, because they don't want to be seen as vulnerable. But it's vulnerable. You're putting your fucking art before someone going, I hope you accept this. Oh, you don't accept that? Shit, man. Like, fuck. Like, okay. Like, now I need to figure out who the fuck I am again, because I thought I was a part of this, and that was turned down by, like, I don't know. It's an interesting thing.
I went to the first Explorer one in St. Louis.
Yeah.
Back in 2017, I think. And I loved it. I mean, even though I'm not a tattoo artist, you could tell there was a huge sense of community there.
Oh, yeah.
It was awesome to meet a ton of artists that, it was just, everybody's there to learn, everybody's there just to hang out with each other, and whether you're a presenter or an attendee, everybody's treating each other at the same level.
You're peers. Yeah. You're all peers there. Yeah. Yes, that is true. There is, because we're all students there. And any of the educators will tell you that right out the gate. They know they're there to learn just as much as the person who's like sitting in the because I'm there too with my notebook, right in the front row, like listening to like Nick Baxter talk, or whoever is up there, like Amy Cornwell or whatever. Like I'm like, how did she do that? What's she doing? Like I'm just as eager to know.
I feel like that's a big perk for the other presenters, is they get to learn a ton.
It's my favorite. I got to be honest. It is one of the best parts about it. Yeah, and then also sitting there and doing the critique thing was what was interesting for me. I had to like, because I don't do good at being like not honest about this stuff, because I feel like if I'm going to ever teach people anything, you got to be like open about your shit. And so I had done these critiques. I'm really good at like, I know I am good at helping people grow and seeing their potential for growth and where they can make alterations in their work. Sometimes I fail at seeing that in my own body of work. It's easier to visually look at what somebody else is doing and be critical of that, but like want to help that, like for me, I can like look and I can be like, oh, okay, man, if you just do this one thing different, it can change your whole game. Like I know I can do that, and I don't often do that with my own work. I'm not sitting there like, I self-critique because I'm like, oh, that could have been better, but I'm not sitting there like kind of like figuring it out why. So I had done these critiques there where I basically would like pull stuff in them to the iPad or whatever, because it's kind of like convenient. You can have them send the file right over, like they dropped it right in. Yeah, they airdrop it. I have their drawing, or their tattoo or drawing or whatever, and then I make the adjustments. Like, okay, so I would have, maybe done this different, or created the silhouette a little bit stronger, or whatever those things were. And I'm detached from the image. Like I'm detached because it's not my image. So I'm just looking at it like where its strengths and weaknesses are and how to make those adjustments. And then I can hand it back and be like, okay, just make these adjustments, man. And you're like, and usually what I do is I'll flip through their whole portfolio and I'll find where the repetitious things happen. Like, okay, they're making the same mistakes over and over and over. So fix this. And then if you fix this one thing, you just fixed all your tattoo, like it's all across the board, because they can't go back into most of these tattoos and fix them, like the average, once they leave, that tattoo's gone. So you got to like know what the lesson is out of the critique. So I did that, and the whole time in my mind, I'm like, man, how dare I critique these people, and I don't critique, like I'm not even honest with myself. So I actually asked Timmy B to critique my portfolio there. Well, I wish I would have gotten to some of the other artists, but I remember asking Timmy. But I had also went back to my room and I uploaded like 3 of my own tattoos, and I critiqued them as if I was still on the floor. And then I was like, ah, man, like, why am I not doing this all the time? Like, because as soon as I sat down and I disconnected myself from the art, it was apparent. It could easily see the like what needed to be fixed. And for some reason, like when you're doing the art, you're like paying attention to like a lot of different variables. So sometimes you're not as conscious of it, but rarely do you look, like you take the picture, you move on or whatever, but rarely are you going, like, do we? And we should be. Going back and sitting down and being like, man, how could this have been stronger? Fuck, like what if I would have done this one thing? Or, like if I bumped the contrast, that would have been better, like, and you just sit and you pick apart your own piece based on fundamentals of art, not based on like, man, that sucked and could have been cooler, but based on like, is the line work good, or could it have been stronger? Is the, does it have like a strong silhouette? Is it readable? Like, and it took me critiquing other people to be like, fuck, I need to do this for myself, because right now I'm being a huge hypocrite. Yeah. Like I'm being like, I'm not doing what I should be for them and for myself. Like,
yeah, but I just think that's human nature. Nobody wants to be introspective and point out people's flaws. Yeah, but
it's easier to point out everybody else's flaws. Yeah. But sometimes, for me, like, that was also part of the journey, was learning to be able to do that. And if I'm not going to take it into my world of art, then,
I bet that was an interesting experience for Timmy to critique a mentor's portfolio.
It was, I love Timmy B because he's like, one, he's just a phenomenal craftsman, but also because he was he was honest about it too. Like, and some of it was like, do you think it's your best work? Just to, like, it's such a shortcut thing. Like, do you think it's the best stuff you're putting out? Like, and once you like have someone who's willing to, it's not like Instagram, like comment sections where everybody's a dick and they got to say like mean stuff. It's like, you're pointing out stuff to be helpful, to help someone grow. It's not like, I got to do this because my ego needs to shine, so I'm going to say a bunch of mean stuff so I feel better about myself. You're doing it because you're like, man, I know if I say this one thing that may be hard for them to digest, they're going to grow from this one thing. And he was able to, he did it in like such a short, like he did it pretty abruptly in a couple things. And I was super thankful to him, because you can also get to a place in your career, like after doing this for so long, a lot of people don't want to tell you where your stuff can grow. And so I would like ask people to be like, hey man, can you help me out? Like what can I do? And people are like, nah man, it's good. Like it's good. And I'm like, you're not fucking helping me at all right now. Like I need like an honest friend who will sit down and be like, okay man, like, this is the area. I need it just as much, and that's why like the Explorer is pretty awesome, because you're getting an honest critique from people who aren't there to hurt you. They're there to help you. I remember, and so that's why I like these seminars, these like things.
Dave Tevenall told me that he was doing a portfolio review for, Cooper from Guru. Mm-hmm. He was doing a portfolio review, and Cooper sat down across from Tevenall and like gave him, and Tevenall's like, I shouldn't be doing mine, or I shouldn't be doing yours. The table should be flipped here. You should be reviewing my portfolio, which is cool. Like high-level artists or top-caliber artists are still going to these seminars to learn from their peers.
Yeah. And it's like that, too. You also, like, sometimes you do, like you can, it's hard to critique other peers, where you have to separate, like, and know like that person's asking you because they really want to they want your help, and they're not doing it so you can stroke their ego. Like, that's not helpful for you to be like, it's helpful for you to be like, nah, man, everything you're doing is great. Like, just say like what you see can benefit me in the long run if I knew this today. You know, I've been very lucky because I've like Dave Koenig and Joshua Bowers have become really close friends of mine, and I, you know, like I have to turn to them for honesty at times, and I'm like, dude, don't worry, you're not gonna hurt my feelings any worse than I've hurt them already during other parts of my life. Like, just help me through this, and then they're like, can give me a clear perspective that I can't see for myself. So, you know, it could just be like, dude, you're having some flow issues, like change these lines, you know, or whatever. Dan Pemble's awesome dude, Dan Pemble's fucking critiques are awesome. Russ Abbott's critiques are awesome. Because they're on it, like they're straightforward and honest about it, and they're looking at your best interest. Like, it's not about like ego stroking or putting people down. It's about like, I'm going to give you a critique to help you grow as a person, like as an artist, you know. So.
I know you don't run the Instagram sites anymore. I only briefly want to talk about them, but you were temporarily running two Instagram sites. One that was primarily talking about issues in the tattoo industry or issues that you saw that you had as an artist, and then you're running one for tips for tattoo collectors, which is super helpful to give advice for people looking to get tattooed. You ran them for some time. Why did you stop running them? I can imagine there was a lot of work to run them. Were you getting backlash from artists?
No.
On the topic of the tattoo industry's one?
No, so I did, actually my page became, it was, like I said, it was initially I'd started talking about my travels cross country. I had wiped off my whole page and started from like zero, and then talked about like I navigated my journey. Then that became like it was kind of like things you may not have learned in your apprenticeship, I think is what I had ended up titling it. Because there was a group of like, there seemed to be like this disconnect between like the younger generation and the older generation of tattooing. It seemed like there was this disconnect that was happening, and I was noticing like a lot of like young artists weren't getting quality apprenticeships. They were kind of just being apprenticed by apprentices, or they were being apprentices by factory shops that wanted to get out as many tattooers as possible. And so I was like, I'm just gonna write stuff. I never like will talk about tattoo like equipment. Like, I don't talk like hot at the technical aspects. I think sometimes we need to leave some of the fucking magic in the bag. So I never talk about like the technical aspects of tattooing. But I was talking about like what you should have learned during your apprenticeship, and maybe apprenticeships should be a certain way, and why they are a certain way, and you know have been done a certain way. Or it was just like my viewpoint on stuff I had seen through 25 years of tattooing that I thought some younger people could read. But then it was like all like things about like balancing my life as an artist and some of the downfalls I had, like not letting, like when I let ego get in the way and how that fucked up my career, like because it's cool to think you're on top, but you can just as quickly be on the bottom. So I just was like trying to be honest with people, and it was like doing really good. It was touching. I was writing a lot. Like I would get up every morning and release a new write-up. I would have like a topic and I would release the topic. And so I was doing that for a while, and I was putting that out pretty like religiously, and that was catching on really good. That's what had gotten me invited to these seminars, these educational things. I'd been asked to come write some, like basically create content for some magazine stuff that I decided not to do. Because I didn't want it to be like, I did it because I was enjoying the process of it. I didn't want it to be like a job, like that it became something I was forced to do, and the material got watered down and old. So I did that, and then I started up a second page because I was hearing like tattoo artists complain about clients. And my big thing is like, I'm big on education. And what I don't like is like right now we're in this state where we have the easiest access to education ever, but people don't want to learn, like nobody's learning. It's like they're using it for like different purposes, but you have all this access to information. It's like the greatest time in history for information. Like, like it's like having that Library of Alexandria at your fingertips, but you don't want to like go to the library. And so you have all these artists that like have access to all these other artists and all knowledge that nobody ever gave out before. Like we used to have to dig for 25 years ago. You're being handed, and some people don't want to like look for the information. But also, people are bitching about people being uneducated, and rather than taking the time to educate them, it's just easier to bitch about it. Like, fuck, these stupid people don't know anything. And so I got sick of all the fucking let's complain about our clientele memes, because there was just too many of these goddamn memes where it's like tattoo artists want to fucking talk about how shitty all their clients are and putting them all on blast, through social media. And to me, it was so ridiculous. Like, this is what you're gonna just keep whining about your client. Why not tell them how to be a better client? And so I started writing another page that was like advice for the collector. Like, and it was like just simple things like, how
to find the right
artist, like, yeah. And it was just very, how like what you could expect within booking an appointment, or what you might expect in trying to figure out pricing, or even stuff like what you might want to wear to your appointment. Like if you're getting your thigh done, maybe you don't want to wear no underwear and a pair of like tight pants, and so it was like stuff like that. And I tried to keep it informational. It just, after a while, like I put all the information out, and then it
becomes like a full-time job.
It became another job, yeah, because now I'm writing those articles, I'm writing these other articles, I'm painting, I'm tattooing, I'm, trying to get my life back in order from all my journeys and stuff, and I'm like, dude, there's a lot that I'm carrying. So the writing I pulled back on. The handling client stuff I pulled back on, just because that wasn't really ever a first interest. That was more of like I'm just going to put, and I just put out a bunch of information, and I just left the site, the Instagram page there. You can't even remember the name of it anymore. And I just walked away from that one. And then, because I also kind of expected like tattoo artists would find the information useful and they would pass it on. And instead they just kept posting memes. And here I am, I've got like, thousands upon thousands of people telling me how great this stuff is, and then they'll post another meme about how shitty their client is. And I'm like, why didn't you share that write-up that I gave you that explains that part of the process you're making fun of them for, but instead you're going to go back to whining, because that's like a thing to do.
Fun at them.
Yeah, and poking fun at them, and then making them feel shitty about the fact that they don't know any better, So there was a lot of frustration sometimes with the tattoo community in that, because they love to whine about stuff, but they don't want to fix stuff very often, or they'll wait till it's all, I'm just generalizing, but it's not too far off, that there's a lot of complaining without action.
So one of the things that you're going to be publishing soon are podcasts and a book.
So the material that I had put into. I'd been putting the material out. It seemed to have gained traction with certain artists, found it very useful. I had been finding myself being like a Dear Abby. Yep. I became like Dear Gunnar. And a lot of young artists and stuff had been, or even older artists who were going through hey man, I'm 20 years into my career, and this is where I'm at, and do you have any advice? So I basically started trying to sit down and put together this information that I was thinking, and it's really just my thoughts on tattooing. It's not therapy, or it's not anything. It's just me, the shit I think about and how I dealt with it in my head, and I put it down on pages. But I've been working on that, and then I'm getting ready to I'm in the process of recording my first season of podcasts that'll kind of address the same thing. So the idea is to just put out educational material on some of it's kind of the spiritual walk of being what it's like being an artist, and some of the shit that I found was helpful in getting through the tougher times, because not everything's a high, and getting through the lows. I kind of talk about the fact that with winter coming, a lot of tattoo artists suffer a lot of artists in general suffer seasonal depression pretty strong. So I wanted to put something out that by winter time had some encouragement in there to keep people kind of just pushing through for the winter. So most of the podcast is going to be like, it's also just a lot of my thoughts, but it's my thoughts on like art and tattooing and the lifestyle, you know, life in general. And then in the future, I want to kind of break into interviews and stuff and get people's perspectives that like differ from mine and see how they handle the same, you know, how would you handle this situation and stuff. But the first season is basically going to be my thoughts on my career and some of the ups and downs of it, and some of the journeys I've taken and what I've learned, and yeah. So basically, that's it.
You have a name for it yet?
Yeah, so it's
so people can be on the lookout for it.
Yeah, it's called the value scale. So I thought the idea that the value scale, you know, that as an artist that we deal with the value scale. It's the, you know, it's not just the black and white, but the gray that creates form. So I thought that was kind of neat, but also like I talk about things that we should be valuing more so than some of the stuff we do value. I just like the idea that I get to kind of talk about some of the gray areas because we talk so like black and white nowadays. I wanted to like kind of get into this like gray area a little bit more and be able to talk on topics of that. So
I like the name a lot.
Thank you.
It fits very properly.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. I think that'll be kind of neat. So
I'm gonna let you go here. I know we've been talking for a while, and I appreciate you taking the time to.
Dude, thank you. It's been awesome getting to watch you guys keep this Tattoo Snob going for so long. So I appreciate this.
So, if you could give advice to a 18-year-old Gunnar, maybe a 20-year-old Gunnar, or just young tattoo artists in general, from veteran tattoo artists, what advice would you give to them?
Start your financial planning right now.
Yeah.
There's no retirement plan for tattoo artists. So if you're not thinking about like, get a financial advisor. Like this is my strongest advice because now that I'm coming to my 40s and I don't have like, there's no retirement plan in order. I didn't do some of the things maybe I should have done 20 years ago. Always my first advice is sit down with a financial advisor, set up a financial plan. Like you should be investing in your future because although you don't understand that these times are like, that 20 years comes faster than you think. And in 20 years, you want to be ready to get through the next 20 years. And if you can't tattoo, you still, you know, like, it's funny to me because artists love this idea of being broke. And it's still like, man, you still are going to want to buy prom dresses for your daughters. Or you still going to want to send them to college. Or you might want to go on vacation and take some time off from tattooing and travel the country. You know, like, there's going to be things that you're going to want to have some security on. Or if tattooing dries up, you're going to want to have like some money set aside to take care of yourself. But you're also going to want a financial plan in order and take care of your body because I watch a lot of people who are in like really rough shape 20 years into their career. And if you're not, you know, you're eating the donuts and the drinking snacks and, you know, energy beverages all day long while sitting in these awkward positions, it'll take a toll on you.
Yeah, definitely for the financial information, you know, incremental or small investments over the course of years. Mm-hmm. Compound interest is incredibly important.
Yeah.
To help your money grow.
Yeah, that's why it's, I mean, I always tell people like a quick book to pick up is the Richest Man in Babylon. And I'm not going to be able to remember the name of the author, but you can even listen to an audio version of it on YouTube, The Richest Man in Babylon. And, you know, like find someone smarter than you to help you invest it. And, you know, it's just, they're easy things and it's told in a storybook format that like I try to like even get my kids to listen to because it's simple, fundamental, like financial information for you to at least begin to have a grasp on what that looks like.
That I know you are a big fan of too is the Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art.
Oh, The War of Art. Yeah, that's a huge one. Yeah, conquering that procrastinations and
getting shit done. Actually,
yeah,
I know you're a big fan of that book. I saw you post about it a while ago, and
yeah, that's usually that. The Richest Man in Babylon and The Alchemist are my like kind of I feel like everybody should read, like at least most artists should read, because The Alchemist is all about like having a dream and pressing forward to like doing it. And if you're a professional artist, you're chasing a dream. Like it really, you know, it's a dream. It's a dreamer's job, you know. So
what's your ratio between painting and tattooing now? I mean, what do you typically work on? I see a lot of paintings that you're working on a lot of different paintings at once.
Yeah, so I just moved back to Ohio, so I'm rebuilding clientele. So that's not as like big as I would like it to currently be. So I'm probably only tattooing maybe like two to 3 days a week tops right now, and then I paint just about every other day. So and I'm probably painting in those nights that I work. So right now it's probably like a 70-30 split. So
if anybody's interested in getting tattooed by you or buying your paintings, what's the best way to contact you?
I honestly am one of those people that allow people to DM me through Instagram because I like being accessible to people. So that's a good Art of Gunnar, at Art of Gunnar on Instagram, or emails is artofgunnar@gmail.com. So that's about it. Yeah. Art of Gunnar.
Art of Gunnar.
That's it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk with us. I know we've known each other for years.
Yeah, quite a while.
You're always been one of my favorite artists to run into. You've always been incredibly nice to me, and I love the pieces that I have from you.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's been a good time.
Yeah. So thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk with us, and hope you enjoy the rest of the Richmond show.
Thank you. You have a good one, man.